Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Theater Podcast, and welcome to the first episode of 2024. Can you believe it? I can't. Well, I guess I can. I thought we'd have flying cars and hoverboards by now. But if nothing else, we still have podcasts. So to kick us off of the new year is Ellen Adair, who is now one of my new favorite people. They have such an interesting story, having grown up to super smart parents without a TV and even without having entertainment in front of them throughout their childhood, made their way into TV and film and just found, of course, this love for Shakespeare as we get into it. They've done tons and tons of Shakespeare. But something that was really interesting they talked about is that they don't want to be other people. They want to explore the part of themselves that is other people, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't the way I'm explaining it, but the way they do is absolutely incredible. So stay tuned for that. Brand new for 2024, I'm experimenting with having a broadcast channel on Instagram. So go over to my Instagram account, theater_podcast, and join the broadcast channel. I don't really know what I'm doing with it yet, but it's just another way to keep in touch and probably gather some questions for upcoming guests, which would be very cool to have your input on. And find me everywhere else. Threads, TikTok, YouTube, you know all the things. Leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening now. Hope you had a safe and happy New Year's. Here's to a great 2024, and here's our episode with Ellen Adair.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest is a star of stage and screen with TV credits that include Bull, The Good Fight, The Sinner, Billions, Homeland, and Nurse Jackie, among so many others. Stage credits include off-Broadway and regional productions of Sleep No More, Romeo and Hamlet, As You Like It, The Importance of Being Earnest, A Doll's House, Macbeth, Taming of the Shrew, and The Merchant of Venice, among a bazillion more credits. And you can now watch them in the lead role of Jamie Miller in a new horror film called Heard. Everywhere you stream your movies, Ellen Adair, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for making me sound so fancy.
You make yourself sound fancy. Listen, I was just like, I don't know which credits to pull out because you're one of those fortunate people that, like, if I dove into all the credits, we would just be here all day long. And that's not the long form podcast that I do.
Definitely boring. Yep. Yes.
No, not at all. I actually wanted to start with, let's see, the last couple things I read. Let's see, Macbeth, Taming of the Shrew, Merchant of Venice. You got like Shakespeare out the wazoo. It's actually like, do you like doing the Shakespeare? Were you classically trained in that way?
It's my favorite is to do the Shakespeare. Yeah, it's been a long time, and I have immortal longings in me is really what the Shakespeare nerd in me should say. Yeah, I have just like, I miss it so much. It feels like a homeland to me, doing Shakespeare. And I think, part of that is, I don't know, I've just been this weird my whole life. My parents took me to see Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, the film, when I was, I believe, 5 or 6 years old, because they had already taken me to see other Shakespeare, like live Shakespeare. And they were like, our kid can probably deal with this. And it was my favorite. I was immediately like, this is my jam. And I made them take me back 5 more times. And I Wait,
how old were you then?
Like, I think I was 6.
Really?
Yeah. I just loved it. I just loved it. In fact, it's funny because I was just having this conversation with my family over Thanksgiving. I was like, it was perhaps the first movie that I saw that didn't terrify me. I feel like so many other sort of movies that are meant for children are like deeply terrifying. But I was like, well, yeah, but just like normal colonial war, like that's fine, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I was completely terrified by like The Little Mermaid and Who Framed Roger Rabbit and The Princess Bride. But Henry V, Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, I was like, sign me up for this.
You are a strange child.
So weird.
Although I gotta say, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that did give me a little bit of like, when I was a kid, because when it took me a second to realize that Christopher Lloyd was a tune inside his human body, and when that all like Spoiler alert for those who haven't been alive in the last 40 years. Christopher Lloyd's the bad guy. That freaked me out. But Little Mermaid?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think that it is possible that my deep aversion for anything with tentacles, like I have a hard time sitting at a table where somebody else is eating calamari. I think that might come from Ursula the Sea Witch. So terrifying. When she becomes big at the end, like the absolute stuff of nightmares. I can't imagine
hold your throat
anything scarier.
You're afraid your voice is going to get taken over calamari appetizers.
I mean,
no, I get it.
Yeah, I guess. I don't even know that I was that terrified of my voice being taken than just like the whole, blah.
Well, my kids now are into Haunted Mansion, the live action. This is the first live action movie they've really gotten into. So they're just at that age now where they're like, all right, there's more to life than animated stuff. And so it was funny the other day, my older one, he asked, there's a kid in the Haunted Mansion, right? Have you seen that one yet?
I have not seen it. No. How old are your kids?
Good. 7 and almost 9.
Okay.
And my older one, there's a kid that's like, I think he's supposed to be 10 in the movie. And he turned to me, he goes, wait, is that a real boy? And I said, yeah, what do you mean? He's like, I didn't know kids could be in movies. And it was just like this light bulb moment went off where he's like, oh yeah, like kids do this too. And so now his whole thing is like, is that animated or is that real? And if that's real, is it computer help? Did computers help make that? So he's like starting to piece all this together. It's really interesting.
I mean, those are all of the most important questions that I think all of us are asking right now. So what a precocious child you have. I'm not remotely surprised.
Well, thank you. Well, going to your childhood then, I know that you had a little bit of sort of an unusual identity growing up, or just didn't quite kind of feel like you fit in. You identify as non-binary, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where did that come from as I guess where did you start? What's the right way to actually ask this question? To realize it, to phrase it, to experiment with it? Like, how does one dabble in the world of non-gender conforming?
Yeah. No, it's such an interesting question. And, I think for many people who don't feel like they totally fit in a gender box, it is often an evolving one. And I think for me, it's certainly an evolving one. And, it's to be completely frank about it, I have actually a lot of, I don't know what the nice way is to say this, like a lot of guilt and shame about what I feel like was my capitulation to the gender binary, even though I felt like always it didn't quite fit me. And so I think that, like, I feel complicated about the fact that it's not something that I knew existed until I was like an adult, like fully, fully into my acting career, right? Like, not just like, oh, I was a grown up, like I had already been an actor for, over 10 years at that point. And it was just that I met a non-binary person and I was like, oh, the first thought that I had was, oh, if I had known that was an option, that's what I would have been this whole time. But I just didn't know that was an option. And, if I sort of then go back into my childhood, certainly like when I was a very young child and so didn't feel like I had, like there were any expectations on me, I just always played pretend that I was people of all or both genders. And I don't know that that's not normal, right? But I'm not sure that it is. For me, it was very much like, I loved Henry V, but like I wanted to be Henry V. So I would like run around the house playing like I'm Henry V. and I really wanted to be Peter Pan. Huge I want to be Peter Pan phase. But like it wasn't exclusively those things, I also just like enjoyed like putting on a princess dress, and I just liked being some like exploring the part of myself that is somebody else, I guess would be maybe the most accurate way than to say being somebody else, was just like always my favorite thing. But that as a very young child, I didn't see that in any way confined in terms of gender. I was just like, oh, like, yeah, I just want to be these parts of myself. And so I think then, like, you know, heading into the awkwardness that is puberty for everybody, right? Like puberty just sucks. Like, let's be honest.
Right.
Nobody's like, this is great. I'm having a ball.
I love puberty.
But I was definitely like, oh, I don't want to be a woman. Like I know for sure, like it felt like something that I couldn't escape. Like as a child, I was sort of able to escape it. And that suddenly there are all these like other responsibilities and like things you have to do to kind of like make yourself into a girl as opposed to just like being the thing that you are. And I hated all of those things. And so I spent a lot of my sort of high school life trying to be like, I have no body. Like there's no body here, right? Like just wearing like very voluminous things and just denying the existence of a body or a gender of any kind. But I always wanted to be an actor, which, as I always say, like belies some lack of personal development. And in high school, like I had this kind of aha moment, which was around the roles that I was normally cast in. And like sometimes those were wonderful and very freeing. And sometimes I was like, oh, I never get to like play some of the parts that would be very interesting for me to play. And I was like, maybe I just have to make myself into a girl in order to do that, right? Like if I'm going to like really play a girl, then I need to like figure out how to do that thing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to, you know, try to just in my life, like figure out how to wear makeup and like put on sort of normal clothes, and be lying if I said that it 100% had to do with being an actor. I think there was also a certain point where I was like, oh, I'm like 16 years old and I am invisible to everybody because that is the choice that I have made. And maybe I would like to just not even be like super shiny and seen by everybody, but just like literally like you could pick me up on a scan of the area as opposed to blending into the wall. But, you know, I do think a lot of it did have to do with like, oh, well, if I want to be an actor, then I have to learn how to be a girl. To some extent, I think that continues. You know, I remember my first agents when I got to New York, they were like, you do not know how to dress yourself. Like you have to dress in like a particular way when you walk into the audition rooms. And I mean, I've just always been like, okay, well, like whatever I need to do is the thing that I will do. Sort of like pragmatic for my career in that way. And so I was like, all right, well, you know, so it's complicated being in an industry that is very much driven by what you look like you are. Mm-hmm. And also like, do people want to look at you? Right? Like it has to be driven by those things.
Want to look at you. That is a horrible way of putting it, but you're 100% correct.
Yeah. And so for me, very much being like, well, how can I most make myself into the thing that people want to look at so that I get to do the thing that I want to do, which is like pretend to be somebody else, right? And so I'm not trying to ennoble it in any way. Like it's been very mercenary and in that particular way. But you know, I will say that. And this is just where I am on the gender identity spectrum, because obviously non-binary encapsulates people who are in a lot of different places. My relationship to gender is that I feel like I'm sort of at the cross-section of agender and bigender. And so it's sort of like I don't really feel like I'm either, but I do feel like I can occupy both. And so what that means is like playing a cisgendered woman is not a problem for me. Like it certainly is for some non-binary performers, but it is not for me. I have no problem just being like, yeah, I can imagine like what that feels like, in the way that I also feel like personally I could play a cisgendered man. It's just, this is what I look like, so nobody's gonna ever hire me to do that. And that is what it is. That's sort of what the whole nature of the industry is. So I'm not trying to bemoan that or anything. I will say that it means that the times in my career, both sort of in my in college, and also a few professional opportunities that I've had where I have gotten to play a male character, usually sort of like along with, double cast in a couple of different roles, have been really meaningful for me even before I knew that non-binary was a thing, that I knew that there was really something about myself that I was being able to express and explore by playing those roles. And I'm just immensely grateful for them, essentially immensely grateful for getting to be an actor at all, for the fact that anybody ever was like, yeah, we'll pay you to do this. Just incredibly fortunate. So I think that was a very long and rambling answer, and probably I could talk about this sort of complexities of non-binary identity and as it relates to a life in the theater for a full 3 hours. So I will try not to do that.
I was going to go back to one thing you said near the beginning of your story, and thank you for sharing. And I have so many questions, but one of the things I want to go back to was you said you like being an actor. You like exploring the part of you that wants to be other people. You don't want to be other people. You don't want to pretend to be other people. You want to explore yourself, the part of yourself that wants to be other people. And I think that's an important distinction, because you're not, well, I'll play Jeopardy, and I'll phrase this in the form of a question. Are you...
You're amazing.
Thank you. Do you by being an actor, you are by default putting yourself in a place to be seen, while at the same time in real life not wanting to be seen? You were saying you were trying to blend in, and you want to at least show up on a scan of the room. You want to, you're alive. You'll show up in a heat scan. Don't worry about it. You've got this dichotomy, and how were you balancing the need to explore yourself and figure out who you are by playing these other people, while at the same time wanting to sort of not draw attention to yourself? And at the time when you were younger, you had even said you had already wanted to be an actor, but at the same time were pretending you didn't even have a body because you didn't like your body. So how were you, it seems like this internal struggle that was taking place for years.
Yes. Perfect. End of podcast. Yeah.
And scene.
Yes, and scene. This has been the Theater Podcast with Alan Seals. Yeah. I mean, 100%. You got to, I think, what was a certain amount of agony for me. I would say as a teenager, right? As a child, I felt like I just existed and I'm gonna play pretend like I'm Peter Pan. And there was no amount of sort of friction for that. And I think it was that sort of as a teenager, suddenly I was like, oh no, I don't want to have a body. Except for if I could use my body to be somebody else. And that was cool. And it could be because it's sort of it didn't have to trap me. I think that's really what it is, right? I think that I felt oh, now I'm going to be trapped into being a woman, and that's not what I want. And so I don't mind sort of going through and occupying the space, but to be trapped into being myself all the time is something that I think is still one of my primary motivations, is to not be trapped in being literally the sum total of my experience. Because that's boring. But I think something that I was getting at earlier is a kind of a distinction between being somebody else in quotes and being the part of yourself that is somebody else, right? Because I think that my view of every human being who lives is that we are all infinity, that we all have infinite capacity to do anything. And that's crazy. And that we have so much space in our imaginative plane that is occupied by beasts and castles. And that is why we need stories. I think for anybody who creates stories or embodies them, why that feels like such a crucial thing, but also I think just for audiences, why audiences need stories. And I think it's why we need so many horror movies and superhero movies, because we're like really looking to exercise that part of ourself that exists, that was made when there were a lot more immediate dangers around us than there are now as human beings. And so it's like we still have that energy and we still just need some way to exercise it. And so I think that I have always been, since I was 5 years old, and I didn't quite have this like theory of human existence, but like very much like, oh, but I need to be all those other parts of myself too. And in some ways, yes, it's like being somebody else, but I think there's really no such thing, because like we are infinity and could be anybody. So that's sort of, for me, I think an important distinction is that if you're like, I want to be somebody else, and I think this is where I was as a teenager, that expresses a certain amount of loathing for who I am, right? That I don't want to be me, I want to be somebody else because somebody else would be better or more interesting than me. Whereas if it's like, oh, I want to be the part of myself that I don't get to be on a daily basis, that is about like radical self-acceptance and self-love and love of that exploration instead of some kind of self-negation.
Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back.
Can I draw a really ridiculous parallel?
I'm so excited.
A, I love that you say that we're infinity. I think that's super cool. B, I want to do mushrooms with you one day. That I think you would be incredible.
Sign me up.
But the parallel I want to draw. So I just got Hogwarts Legacy on PlayStation 5. It's a quest-based game, and you develop your character based on how you answer questions and have conversations. And every conversation you have, you're allowed to take like sort of a really good, a really bad, or sort of an in-between answer. And there's other games. This is not the first game to do this, but I love how like I like to think of myself as a nice person, and I like to think of myself as doing right things. But every now and then, when I know it's not going to harm anybody, I want to explore that little part of my character, who I named myself Sir Dad's-a-Lot McGee. So Sir Dad's-a-Lot sometimes is a little mean to his fellow students, and it's a little bit cathartic in a way, if that makes sense. So I know I'm not really explaining this well, but I'm picking up what you're putting down, that sometimes there's all these little bits inside that you just have to uncover and see how they feel. You try them on a little bit.
I mean, I think you're explaining it extremely well, or perhaps you're just explaining it to the right person because I understand exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I think that, the joy of being an actor is the joy of being able to live every kind of conceivable life without doing actual harm to yourself or to your fellow people. Right? And instead, ideally, you're doing good for other people by allowing them, if they're not the acting type, but simply the viewing type, like to also experience that, to also experience the extremity of the imaginative plane, which is, I think, the term that I used for it earlier. Yeah. Yeah. It's why it's so fun to play bad guys, and why it's so fun to, to like watch action movies or horror movies or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone said something to me once that kind of put things in perspective too, that bad guys, when playing a bad guy, you still play their truth, because the bad guys don't wake up in the morning thinking, I'm going to do bad to people. They wake up in the morning thinking, I'm doing what's right. When you approach it with truth and you apply like exactly what you said, just applying that piece of yourself that you get to experience without actually doing it and without actually harming people, you get to have so much fun.
It's really fun to play bad guys. Yeah, and I think, for actors, it's very natural because we're used to a kind of emotional transference, right? So, Bob Krakauer would call it personalization, although I know there's plenty of people in the Bob Krakauer space who are like, don't use the word personalization anymore. But it's essentially like what this thing means to this character. What is that thing for me? So like, because I love metaphors, they're my native language, I always kind of think of it like, here's a map of what this character cares about, the things that they hurt, like the things that have hurt them, the people that they love, the people that they, have wounded them. And then what does my map look like, and how can I kind of like line them up so that when I'm playing this character and this thing presses on me, I'm like, oh, I don't have literally that same wound of that same person with that same relationship, but where is my similar wound, and like how can I press on that too? So when you're playing a bad guy, you just make alignments that nobody else would make, right? You're just like, oh, well, for me, this is like whatever your nefarious bad guy goal would be, like, I want to get this like nice part in a television show, right? So you just want those things in the same degree. And the reason that it's creepy is because the person is acting like something that should be nefarious is just the most normal and natural thing to want. But like, you know, any actor is capable of doing that. And I think, yeah, it's exactly like the dissonance of like, oh, you shouldn't be okay with doing that, but you're okay with doing that. That is, yeah, the fun of playing a bad guy.
I think that's a great transition to Herd because, excuse me, I forget the character's name. Who's the guy, big beard, who's like the number 2? He's trying to be number 1.
Bernie?
So, is it
Bernie? The Big John Gruber. That's Jeremy Holmes' character. He's sort of like in charge of their kind of militia group, and then there's Bernie and Tater are the like main 2 other militia guys.
Yeah,
that we
not
make.
Tater, not Big John. So it's got to be Bernie. And so Bernie is this guy, I think, who exemplifies what you just said perfectly. And this performance is incredible. Where he's just laying out these lines like, I believe what I'm doing is right. Like, we got to go kill all these people. And like, I don't see anything wrong with it. But on the outside, he's a complete asshole. But he doesn't believe that. That's just what he knows.
Yeah.
And the way that he just plays it like, doo-doo-doo, like I'm just going about my day. I don't know that I'm hurting people. I'm from North Carolina, so whenever I think about hurt, I get my southern accent back.
Yeah, that actor is Brandon James Ellis, who's like, you know, done a number of things on Broadway, and he's immensely talented, and he's so sparkly in the film. He's just like insanely charismatic. I think definitely threatens to walk away with the film in just how magnetic he is every moment that he's on screen. He's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, I can't. Amazing. Yeah, your scenes with him, absolutely incredible. But so Herd, you're a lead character. Your character is in a lesbian relationship that is on the rocks, and you don't often see gay storylines, queer storylines in horror at all. And I didn't know what to make of it at first when I was reading the log line, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. We got a little bit of that going on, a little bit of this going on, and then like I'm expecting Walking Dead kind of zombie sort of thing. And then I didn't know if I needed to be more scared of the infected or of the frickin' militia. And that's what really left me feeling uncomfortable in a good way. Uncomfortable in a good way. Because I was like, oh my God, I don't want the unsick people to do harm to these 2 characters that I care about.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly the story that the filmmakers were trying to tell. This is written by Steve Pierce and James Allardyce together. And it was, you know, partly inspired by, it was shot in the place that Steve is from. It was literally his town. And so he's sort of feeling like he's kind of, you know, he's lived a lot of time in the city now, but he's also, you know, has so much of his life that is like from that community that he just sort of feels like he doesn't quite belong to either anymore. And that was sort of the genesis of the story, which I think is really interesting. But in terms of the fears that you have in the movie, I think that's 100% what they were going for. I mean, I think this is something that happens in a lot of great zombie movies where it's sort of like, oh, is the real terror actually other live human beings, right? So Herd is not the first movie to do that, but I think it does it really, really well. And I think one of the ways that I think it does it so well is that I think it's an entertaining zombie movie, but it is also really, in my opinion, holding the mirror up to our society right now. That I think the story is very much about the way in which adversity ought to bring people together, and yet it seems to only divide people, at least right now. Mm-hmm. So I think that this movie is really a picture of, and I'm not going to say the eternal human tendency to divide in the face of adversity rather than come together. But I think certainly the part of our society that is very reflective of that at this moment.
I 100% agree. And I mean, just describing a little bit about the movie itself, it's
I'm
like
not selling it very well. Sorry.
No, you're selling it just fine. And what I want to dive into, I guess, is so. I mean, on the outside, it's a zombie movie, and then on the inside, we're following these characters, who just happen to be two women. They're in a relationship that's having trouble, and they go on this quest to try to fix their relationship, as any two people in a loving relationship would do. And just so happens that there happens to be this infection of some sort that happens at the same time. And you see this, I mean, especially in New York City too, but like politically what's been going on now, and then even with COVID, the have and the have-nots, even just like, God, when it comes down to raiding stores for toilet paper and water. Remember in early 2020 when everything broke out and it was just everyone's hoarding hand sanitizer and all of this? It was kind of nuts. But in Herd, there's these two fighting militia groups, one that's got this military training, and then, like, for lack of a better phrasing, sort of the redneck contingent of I got the right to bear arms, Constitution says I can do whatever I want kind of thing. And both of them have a stake. And who's to say that the other isn't right or isn't wrong? And that's what's so confusing about it. And it caused me to be a little bit introspective about things, because I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything else, but yeah, coming out of that, I really am trying to evaluate what I would do in that sort of situation. Because if you start helping people, as one should, I think, you're going to get stepped on, taken advantage of, and otherwise probably seriously hurt by those who don't think the same way.
Yeah, I think that in some way that is like the ultimate terror of this story, of any kind of story like this, where you're ultimately seeing civilization that is being civilized to each other devolve to such a degree, and how rapidly that could happen. And I think, this is sort of related to what I was saying before, but I think that because some of this goes a little spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about all of the ways that this is the case, but I think that the film is very much about how do we draw lines between ourselves and other people, and who do we say that's them over there and they are different from me and I'm over here and I'm like this, instead of acknowledging our mutual humanity. Because it's exactly the case of, like, it's a little hard to tell who are the good guys here. Mm-hmm. But I think for me anyway, my takeaway from the film is that the reason for that is because, like, we should all be on the same side, right? Like, that it doesn't happen. But because we're all actually humans and we should be fighting the same battle together instead of splintering into factions and warring over resources and stuff. And yeah, I mean, partly because it's a virus-based zombie movie. When I first read it, I was like, oh, this was written in 2020. And it was interesting for me to learn that they actually had started the script before that. And I mean, I would imagine that a certain amount of just seeing the way that the country responded to the pandemic informed some of the things that they did, specifically with this sort of like tired governor character who has this sort of like homemade PowerPoint of like, do not antagonize the infected and that kind of a thing. I think was very much came out of the pandemic experience. I think there are a lot of parallels, because it's literally, being afraid that you're going to get infected, but then it's also kind of the way that the entire society breaks down in response to that stimulus.
And just destroying immediately what isn't familiar. Either taking what you can, hoarding what you can out of fear, and destroying what is unfamiliar.
Yes. Yeah. It's the ultimate scarcity mindset, right? Not an abundance mindset in sight.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. And I think that it's the films like this exist to be like, what would I do in this situation? And unfortunately, we've lived through interesting enough times that I think we're all forced to be a little bit more real with ourselves about what we would actually do. Fun times.
Something else I want to touch on real quick is a love, just a slight love of baseball. Which, for those who don't know you, I'm being incredibly sarcastic. You're obsessed with it.
I am obsessed with it.
And you've done actual commentary for MLB, right? Major League Baseball, and obsessed with the Phillies. And I also read that you grew up without a TV. But so growing up without a TV, is that what led to acting? But where did the baseball come in? And like, where do you find time for all of that with everything else going on?
Oh my goodness. Such a good question. So many questions. Yes, I did grow up without a television. The rumors are true. They're not rumors. I talk about it all the time because I think it's part of the reason why I'm so weird, right? So I just want to be like explanatory context on why I'm so weird. I had no TV.
Asterisk.
And so, yeah, baseball was either like we went to Veterans Stadium or we listened to the baseball on the radio. Or then because I grew up in both Philadelphia and Bloomington, Indiana, so we would go to see baseball in Cincinnati and Chicago, and also, yeah, baseball on the radio just was like a large part of my growing up and continues to feel like the sound of my mother's heartbeat. Like it's just so calming. I'm just like immediately totally relaxed when I hear baseball on the radio. I mean, unless it's a postseason game and I'm very involved in that way. So yeah, it's sort of a comical long and maybe not that interesting story how I ended up getting to be on MLB Network, basically through being on a bunch of baseball podcasts talking about baseball. And of things that are not an art, talking about baseball is probably my favorite thing. I really, really love talking about baseball. And, anytime that somebody wants to like pay me to come on TV to talk about baseball, I am always excited. Yes, growing up without a television, it was very much about theater for me. I loved Shakespeare so much. I did my first Shakespeare play when I was 12. That was like student Shakespeare, basically. And I did my sort of first professional Shakespeare with grown-ups. And I was Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream when I was 15. That was very much, I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I studied, I have an English degree because my parents are both college professors, and they were like, you don't get to study theater for your undergrad degree. And so I was like, I'll get this very useful degree in English.
I'll show you.
But I did some professional training programs during the summer. Loved the one at Shakespeare and Company in Western Massachusetts. And so, yeah, I was very much like, I want to do Shakespeare. That's what I want to do with my life. And then when I was right out of school, I got cast in like a couple of TV things in Boston. And I had not yet owned a television. It's not that I'd never seen TV. It's not that I'd never seen movies. It's just that I didn't live in a house with constant access to it. I just really fell in love with the work, with the scale of on-camera work, with the notion that all I need to do is have a thought and it's going to show up, and I don't need to I know that show is like such a bad word, such a naughty word to use in any kind of a way, for theater as well as for on camera. But yeah, if you're in a 1,000-seat house, you need to be like, how can I make a small physical adjustment so that I make sure that the people who are in the back are like getting the story? And I enjoy that kind of work too, very much, because I think working predominantly on camera for the last few years of my life, I really miss being like a full body person in a space. Anyway, that was sort of then what it was like being on TV that led me to be like, oh, maybe I want to do more TV, which is, I think, not the normal journey for a lot of people. But yeah, I really love the spontaneity in on-camera work as well, like the kind of notion that this time I ought to do it differently than I did it last time, because they've already got that one, so I might as well do something different. I think that's really, both of those are things that just really appeal to me from a craft perspective.
It's very cool.
Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back.
And then backing up even more, though, when you were a little kid, you said that, I guess, was it going to see the movie when you were, what did you say, 5 or 6, right? Was it that made you want to become a performer in general? Like you were like, I want to do that?
I think it might have been. I had a sort of a weird opportunity to meet Kenneth Branagh when I was working on Cymbeline at the Barrow Street, and he saw it. I was understudying, and I was not. I was lucky enough to get to go on a few times, but that was not one of the days. So I went, and I knew he was there. People told me he was there, and I found him in the lobby in the intermission, and I was like, "I'm an actor because of you," and he was just like, "That's very nice." He was. So that was the story that I told to Kenneth Branagh when I just accosted him out of nowhere. But I think that it was probably, my parents took me to see that movie because they knew that I was already into it. I think what I remember as being a couple of this early formative experiences was that we went to go see a family friend in, I think what was probably a community theater production of The Mikado. And he was playing The Mikado. I thought that was so cool. I mean, so I was young, I was a toddler. I was just oh, wow, grown-ups also get to do the thing that is my favorite thing, which is, pretending to be other people / the parts of myself that I don't get to be. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that was the first time that I was wait, I know that person, but he gets to be different with a lot of other people who are also getting to be different. And that's really fun. And so I think that was kind of my first notion that it was a thing that grown-ups did and not a thing that just kids did. And I was like, yep, that's what I want to do.
That's fair. I mean, I wore out my VHS tapes of Music Man Singing in the Rain and West Side Story. Those are my three that I went to all the time because we didn't have on demand. You hear that, kids? You couldn't just dial it up.
Look, I also loved West Side Story, but, and this is, my parents are both Luddites, that they're Luddite college professors. That's why we didn't have a TV. I feel like I always need to explain that in case people are like, are they Amish? So I had my mom's record of West Side Story. I wore that record out literally, which you can't, obviously, kids in the old days, you could wear out the media, right? You could literally wear out the VHS tape. There were so many skips on Dear Officer Krupke from me jumping around to that song. Yeah. I always wanted to be Riff. That was who I always wanted to be.
You'd be a good Riff.
I think of myself as a single threat, really. But I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I would love to be.
Do you sing?
Not well enough for musical theater. I have done a lot of singing in plays where they're like, we're going to give you a musical number. And I'm like, you've seen the no musical theater that's on my resume, right? And they're like, yeah, but so I have done that. But I do not consider myself to have a remotely competitive for musical theater voice. If you need me to sing a song in a play, I can do it. People will not leave the theater with blood streaming from their ears. That's my review of my singing voice.
Jesse Green from the New York Times says, blood did not stream out of my ears. 4 stars. Okay, so on that, let's wrap with 3 questions I ask everyone to end the episodes.
Exciting.
Yes. The first one, just very simply, is what motivates you?
What a great question. So I think if I'm going to try to think of an umbrella concept for this, and this is maybe so umbrella-y as to not even be helpful, but I feel like the thing that motivates me is connection. So I think that one of the aspects of that is my favorite part about being an actor is, in fact, not being other people. That's great, but that's / part of myself that I don't get to be. But my favorite thing is other actors. It's just getting to watch what the other actor is going to do tonight and listen to them and play with them is just, it's the best thing in the world to me. I just think it's the absolute best thing in the world. And so, obviously audiences are wonderful and directors are always important and often such a great collaborator to getting all of us more into the space of the outer space of who we are, right? But I think for me, really day after day, the thing that keeps me crawling back is what are my co-stars going to do today? So I think that that's the kind of connection, but that I also do think that then all of the things that I was blathering about earlier, right? Connection to the other parts of myself that I don't get to be through getting to literally embody a story. Or for me, I've been writing a lot more. And so also to really get to try to like inhabit somebody else's point of view by writing it is also wonderful. And I think that connection is part of that in terms of like a holistic view of the self, but then also in terms of the fact that I think that art has this incredible capacity to connect people through interpretation of stories. Our output as human beings is carbon and stories, right? Like we are always turning everything that happens to us into a story of who we are in the world, what the world is, even if we're not aware of it. And that the thing that art can mean to us can be so transformative. If I think about what other people's stories have meant to me, the way that they have transformed my inner landscape, or the way that a painting can transform your mood, or for everybody, like a piece of music. And that what I'm doing is not just connecting to the piece of art, but I'm like connecting to the mind on the other side of it, right? It's this incredible way to have a web of humanity, essentially, right? Like being connected through art, being connected to the minds of the people who have made the things. And that I really feel like connection is the substance of miracles. Any kind of connection, whether that's like human connection or whether that is like connection through story, through art. I think that's like it's the magical substance that binds the universe.
Wow.
So that's what I think.
Wow. I'm just letting this sit for a second. One of the things that I truly, truly miss about performing regularly myself, something very similar, is the reaction, being able to react to what your co-stars are doing, what your scene partners are doing. And I think it's along the same lines. It's just genuinely listening and just waiting. It's exciting. It's titillating to wonder, like, what are they going to do now? How are they going to do that differently this time? And then you just let it go. Man, I've had some of the best scenes from completely unexpected moments, and you just roll with it, and it's the best. I agree. It is the best.
It's the
Absolutely.
best. Yeah. Or like absolute delight that it is when something very fixable goes wrong.
Yes.
Right? But to be like, all right, look, it's different today.
Yeah, you
so
get
fun.
a little excited.
So juicy. Yeah. Yeah. Like if the lights go out and, you're in a play from before there was electricity, hard to work your way out of that one. But like a lot of things, like I am not above adding text in a Shakespeare play to be like, that fell down. Right? Just acknowledge the thing that's happening so that we can all move on.
Damn it, Macbeth.
It's delicious.
Okay, let's see. So second question then, what advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now starting out down a similar path?
Oh, that's also really great. And, interestingly, I sort of feel like two things. I feel like, having just had the conversation that we just had, one is like figure out how to take care of the light inside you. Like the world generally, but I think particularly the world of this industry is one of wild swings in one direction or another. And so kind of figuring out how to have your own mental equilibrium is the thing that will keep you in it. Because ultimately, I think that tenacity or just literally staying on the ship when the tide is roiling, like it has been for all of us for a few years at this point, like that is the thing that is going to make your career, whatever that career ends up being. But if you stay in it, that's what a career is. That's what it actually is. But what just occurred to me was I went back to BU, to the theater group that I was in college for a screening of Heard. And I got sort of the same question, and I think I gave a less good answer to it than the one that I just gave, but I will also go ahead and offer this one, which is just whatever lesson you learn or whatever you feel like is your lesson, you're going to need to keep learning that lesson. And I feel like that would have been very helpful for me as a young person to be like, oh, it's not like I flipped a switch and all of a sudden like I am fixed and I am now a good actor forever. And like for me, for everybody, I think, for every artist, it's going to be a different thing. But for me, just to give an example so that I am clear with what I'm talking about, it was my first summer at Shakespeare and Company, and the wonderful late Dennis Krosnick, I was, talking to him about like, I feel like I haven't done any good work in like a while. And anyway, he, having observed me for the summer, he said, Ellen, what I think you have to know is that the best student does not necessarily make the best actor. And I was like, whoa. Because I think it's very true. And I think, to go back to baseball for a second, I think that this is a thing that's a parallel between baseball and acting that has increased my love of baseball over the years, is that they're both things where, like, if you try too hard, you will not succeed when you're in the moment of doing the thing, right? Like, so it's very important if you're a baseball player to like figure out how to tinker with your pitches and like take your batting practice and work on your swing mechanics. And for actors, it's very important to do, the parallels of all of those things. Like you need to keep training, and you need to keep sort of like working on your instrument, which I know sounds sort of pretentious to say it that way, but like it's just true. So you need to do all of those things. Obviously, you need to do all of your work. You really need to do your script work. You really need to know your lines. You really need to like have dug into your character and have personalized it and all of those things. And then when the moment comes that you as an actor step into your actor's batter's box, you have to just like let all of that go and just exist in the moment. And I think because I am the child of two college professors, and like I really like love being a student, and I really like love just working really hard, that is not helpful as an actor to work really hard like when you're in the moment of performance. So this is not everybody's journey, but this is my journey, and I will continue to fall into any number of like, I just studied with this teacher and like, look at me doing the things that they taught me, instead of like, I'm just going to be present and do the thing. So I think for me at an early age to know like, oh, there's not going to be a moment when this is fixed. Like I'm going to always have to sort of apply myself to whatever is my, particular foible, right? And so you can just get to a point where you sort of recognize it sooner and adjust faster. Like, oh, here's me, I'm doing this thing again. So yeah, I think those are the two main things that I would say. Obviously, I feel like this is another topic that I could probably talk about for 3 hours, but I'll try not to.
Okay, well, I will ask the last question here, and it is by far the hardest one. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Is this one play? Well, I mean, or like show, or is it like a specific production of a show?
You can be as specific as you'd like. That's the hard part.
Oh, that is the hard part. Well, I'll tell you the thing that's coming into my heart is the Mark Rylance production of Twelfth Night, which I saw first when I was at Oxford and like made a trip into, and like didn't know who Mark Rylance was, just like, oh, I'm going to just go to the Globe and see what's ever is on. And just my life was changed by seeing Mark Rylance play Olivia. And I mean, Stephen Fry was also great, right? Like the whole production was incredible. But there's just something, again, I guess we've been talking about this thing, like so radically present about Mark Rylance. Like that's what his charisma derives from, that there's absolutely nothing, it seems to me, put on. He's just like complete response to the moment. I mean, I think he's my favorite actor. And so whatever it is, I will go see Mark Rylance in something. And so if I could only see one thing for the rest of my life, I think I would probably choose to see him in that particular performance, because also like I'm going to pick a Shakespeare play. If I can pick only one thing, just because, the poetry of it and like the depth and the multitudes. And I feel like there's so many different ways that there are to watch Shakespeare, makes it really fulfilling to watch multiple times.
I love the way you think. Think about like molecular levels and just we are infinity, and I could just listen to you speak forever. I really could. It's
Well, you almost did, so. You're so kind and patient. You're the
I also wrote
best.
down that the title of this episode is going to be Rosalind is my gender identity. So there we go.
Perfect. Yay.
Yes.
I love it so much.
Are you online? Do you play the social media game?
Oh gosh, I try. I do try. And unfortunately, my handle is different on like almost all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the artist formerly known as Twitter, I am at Ellen_Adair, and I am on Instagram and Threads as Ellen Adair G. There's just like the G, just the letter G after that. And I am on TikTok newly. That's just at Ellen Adair. And I am on Blue Sky at Ellen Adair. There's too many social medias. Some of them have got to figure out what they're doing. Yeah.
I posted on Blue Sky for like 3 minutes, and then I was like, what am I doing? I don't need another one. I haven't even mastered TikTok, but I follow you on the Instas, Ellen Adair.
Yep. Ellen Adair. That's how I should start saying it. Yeah.
You're just
yeah.
like,
it is for my married last name, which is Gildy. So that it's.
I would go with the pirate motif, like I'm Ellen Adair.
Can I tell you my favorite joke?
Please.
What's a pirate's favorite letter?
R.
Ah, you would think that, but it'd be the C. It's my literal favorite joke.
I always do that.
Because you get to do a voice. You get to do
Yes.
a voice in the joke.
I always like Pirate's favorite subway train, and it's the R. But then I like Fonzie's.
But you think that, but it'd be the C.
Oh, damn it! Oh, how did I not see that coming? I also like, what's Fonzie's favorite train? A.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's
you
pretty
go.
good.
All right. So,
And so much
listeners-
time spent waiting at subway platforms where we can entertain ourselves with those jokes.
Well, if you're still listening, everybody, what are you doing? We're just telling bad jokes now. I love it. What did one hat say to the other hat?
You're looking very nice today.
You stay here. I'm going on ahead.
Oh my God, I love it so much. I love it so much. Especially because I think at first I thought you said you stay hair. Like I thought that, like, I was like, oh, there's so many things. And then I was like, oh no, it's actually the end is the punchline anyway.
Yes. You say, you stay hair. No, that's the Southern accent. You stay hair. I'm going ahead. Okay.
Going
what's
on ahead.
what's
really
an
good.
Irish dentist's favorite time of the day?
2:30.
Tooth hurty. Tooth hurty. And then my last
But it does
one.
depend what part of Ireland you're from, because you might just say 2:30.
Tooth hurty. Well, yeah, that screws up the joke. You have to go with the most offensive accent for it to actually work. Let's see. Okay, last one. Bear walks into a bar. He's looking forlorn. He just crawls up to the bar. Bartender says, "What are you having, Bear? You look pretty sad." Bear says, "I'll have a beer." Bartender says, "Why the big pause?" He goes, "I've had them all my life."
Oh, very good.
And with that, find me online on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all the other bad places that I tell bad jokes. Leave a rating and a review. Hopefully, if it's a 5-star if you like my jokes. If not, it's still a 5-star, please. And thank you. Thank you to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. And Ellen, thank you so much. I had so much fun talking to you. I literally could just listen to you pontificate for hours. You're incredible.
You are so kind. You are so much fun to talk to and tell jokes to. And I too, I would happily pontificate at you for hours.
It's like, what happened to you today? I got pontificated at. Is that good? Oh yeah.
Rough.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.